Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. I used to say at this time of the year, let's get ready for season, but the season never ends. We just changed styles, boys, and happy to have our 25 to 45 demographic guy back. GT, good to have you back on the airwaves, man.
Missed you boys. It'll be a lot of fun.
You're making the long trip to preseason nationals this weekend. How far is that for you exactly?
I mean, the travel is going to be insane. So I will pass the Des Moines International Airport, and then I'll be there.
It's a 20 minutes?
About 10-minute drive.
Well, as many frequent flyer miles and hotel miles you have, I'm happy that you get to do your job and sleep in your own bed. So That's awesome. So a lot of things to get to, but I think we need to start out with U23s. And I don't know that we're going to go through all 20 weight classes, but GT, give us some perspective. You're our international guy. I think Mark and I try to have some knowledge on that, but what Elor did this year is unbelievable, right? Like it's literally never been done in our country. I don't know if like somebody else has done it in Russia, Japan, whatever. So I don't mean to minimize what anybody else has done, but in America, 3 age group world titles, including the senior world title in 1 calendar year. I feel like if she was a man, like this would be front page stuff. I just think, women's wrestling doesn't have the platform yet that it should. Like, if she was if a David Taylor, a Kyle Dake, a Jaden Cox, any of those guys coming out of, they were in college that age, like a college freshman or sophomore did that, like this would be all we're talking about. Just tell us, like, help us sort of frame this appropriately.
Well, I think for me, it's like this year or this calendar year where she basically like did the clean sweep, right? Like juniors, U23s, or in order, seniors, then goes and gets the U23 title. And just the amount of dominance that she basically exerted on the world of wrestling through that entire phase is, it's just a completely historic run. And USA Wrestling's done a very good job of kind of promoting Amit through the social media aspects and articles and things of that nature, because it is such a historic run for a USA Wrestling athlete.
Yeah.
And she's a global superstar at this point, because at every single level, she's accruing fandom and success. So it's, in the world of women's wrestling, I think the only person that's kind of mimicked her level of dominance so far, maybe just this year, not necessarily in her career, would be Susaki from Japan.
That's literally the person I was going to ask you about. Yeah.
And Susaki has like an absurd stat line for I believe this year. I don't think that she hasn't been beaten in international competition, I believe, in 3 years. It's just an unheard of stat line. And then once again, I should have had some of this pulled up for a meet.
She has 16 gold medals, I think I saw, like at, senior level and age group all along the way. And some people can kind of denigrate, like I won cadets, okay? But if you don't win anything else, people are like, you won cadets. But if you win cadets and then you win U20s and then you win U23s and then you win seniors, then everything is, those all count even more because you proved you could do it as you got better.
When for Amit being able to do this at the very, very highest senior level is, at her age group or age level is, she's the youngest ever world champion in USA Wrestling history, beating Kyle Snyder by almost I think it was 6 months. So, as far as the age, for her to be a world champion at her age group for USA Wrestling, she's the youngest to ever do it. Men's, women's, Greco, any style.
So Mark, you and I have watched wrestling for a lot of years. Not joking, but you a few years longer than I have. Like, I know us focusing on women's wrestling and freestyle wrestling is new for the last couple of years, but having seen her wrestle, and you have such a great mind for wrestling. I mean, from your lens, how do you see this?
Well, at 18 years old, she's phenomenal, and I think she's one of those. She comes around once in a lifetime. And I know, Grant, you talked about the lady from Japan. I'm not sure she was doing this when she was 18. Ami hasn't lost since 2019, I think. I'm pretty sure, even a match. So, I mean, her dominance is not just this year. It's been the last few years. She's got to go out and showcase what she can do. I guess my question is, where is she going to end up in 2024 at the Olympics? Because she's in between the two weights. And so she's going to have to decide, does she go down or does she go up? And we have gold medalists at both weights. So that's just, I'm wondering what she will do there.
Well, my guess would be, when you're that age, you tend to grow. It's not like she's 27 and, like her body's settled into her walking around weight. And my guess is she would go up. Obviously, it's a great question. And for the United States of America, it's a really good problem, right? You've got Mensa Stock, you got Gray, you got Diamond Guilford, who did great over there, at the gray weight, and then Elor in between them. It's like, well, we're probably going to be really well represented. GT, I don't want to say this wrong. What was Elor's status at the Olympic trials? I thought I saw she was too young to compete at the time. I just want to make sure I'm saying that right, especially on USA Wrestling's airwaves. But
yeah, I believe that she was just shy of the age requirement in order to compete at the Olympic trials or then compete at the Olympic Games in 2021. So that was why she was not able to basically represent the United States or even in that process during the Tokyo trials.
Right. And I'm not saying like, well, she would have made the team. No, just not trying to say like she would have definitely beat somebody out. But I think people would go, well, she's this good. Why didn't she compete in the trials? Because when Mark brought up she hadn't lost in a couple of years, if you don't know that piece, you'd go, well, why wasn't she on the Olympic team? So just kind of connecting those dots for people. On the rest of U23s, GT, obviously, you followed that a lot. I mean, I think we've got Mark and I probably have a few takeaways, but overall, what were your takeaways on the men's and women's team? I would like to say publicly, I wish I was 1/10 as good of a dancer as Diamond Guilford is, by the way. Like, solid celebration dance.
Oh, yeah. Celebrates like every amazing, her dance moves second to none.
Like, if she could dunk on somebody, she'd be on Sports Center after that dance.
For sure. As far as I would say the men's and or women's, basically results, as we have kind of known, the depth chart in men's freestyle continues to grow with, medals with the U23 men's freestyle team and along with the women's freestyle team. Just being able to have that depth, even I believe at heavyweight, Tony Cassiope, I believe, was the first ever two-time U23 medalist. I think Cody Goodwin put that out, which, I mean, I trust that guy with his reporting skills. So it's just amazing to see the progression of those athletes at the collegiate level and then being able to compete and having a great representation of what the USA collegiate system is producing right now.
Yeah.
Both men's and women's.
Right. So just so people don't know, and this is on themat.com and Flo did an article on it, and I'm sure everybody else did too, but Heidley and Cardenas with silver medals. I think Cardenas and Tanner Sloan, Cassiope bronze, David Carr was 11, Starace with the bronze. I don't know if I'm missing anybody else here, but to me, and I know Mark's going to talk about first name Tony, but to me, like, the biggest surprise in a negative way was David Carr not placing. and probably the biggest surprise on the upside was Tanner Sloan making the finals and Jacob Cardenas making the finals. We've all coached. GT's still coaching. And confidence is the chicken and the egg thing. And obviously these guys are really good. But to believe you can do what your goals are, sometimes it's hard. You know, GT and I were talking earlier this week, just privately offline, about the importance of practicing and competing. And, you know, I told him some things about when I was practicing and somehow, where I didn't always, like, if I could do things over, I think I could do better. But that somebody putting their arm around you once in a while and saying, look, everybody goes through this, you're going to be there. Well, like a Tanner Sloan, who has not at the NCAA level done what he wants to do. Cardenas, who has at the NCAA level not done what he wants to do, to make the finals of a world championship can definitely catapult you mentally, if nothing else, to, hey, I can do this. Especially if you're Sloan. He was wrestling like 211 or whatever that weight class is, and he's going to go back to 197. You know, Mark, you took a lot of kids that were just state medalists. I don't mean, no disrespect to that, but it turned them into college All-Americans. And then they went on an All-American at the next level up from junior college. I'm sure you saw that. So when you see these guys doing this, what is sort of, when you put your coach's hat on, how do you see that?
Well, I see USA Wrestling has just gotten so strong, especially in men's freestyle. Obviously, women's is going at a rate that, you don't usually see. But, for the men's side of it, it was nice to see some of the guys that you normally wouldn't expect to place at a world championship reach that level. And that just tells you how good the United States is at this, at freestyle. There were some kids that I was surprised did not do better. But it's a tough tournament. There's a lot of good guys in the world. And yeah, Big Tony wrestled a guy from Georgia who was I didn't get to see the match, and I do want to go back and watch it, but was an absolute beast. I mean, they said he was like Hercules. And then that guy beat Tony handily. Two good single legs and dumped him right to his back on both of them, tripped him. And you don't see that at heavyweight that often. Then all of a sudden he goes out and wrestles a guy from, Iran, who we knew was good. We thought Tony would have problems with that. And the guy from Iran kind of just took care of business. It wasn't even that close, match-wise. So I think we're sitting in a good position, but there's some other countries out there that are very talented also. I don't want America to think that, it's ours now, because it's not. There's a lot of good wrestling out there.
Yeah. So I want to say this, and I want to, we stopped saying this, but we probably should. The opinions of this show are the opinions of the three of us and not of USA Wrestling. That's probably my fault as the person at the beginning that should do those reads. So I'm going to say this. I don't think USA Wrestling is going to care when Gary Abbott screens this. I think he'll be fine with it. I think it's proof. Like, we took third in men's freestyle as a team. I think it's proof that I think some people are like, oh, USA Wrestling, they just roll these guys out. Like, they all train at their separate RTCs. They just put on uniforms, and USA Wrestling has nothing to do with their success. Probably not true, right? If you go from third to first, as the age group goes up, because you could argue that the under 23 guys are actually getting better training, because if Carter Sirachi's training with David Taylor, that helps Carter Sirachi more than it helps David Taylor, because he's not supposed to be as good yet. If you're the guy that's, if I'm working out with Grant and Grant's better than me, that helps me more than it helps Grant. So it tells you that stuff is happening at the senior level, at the RTC level, but also at the USA Wrestling level, where these guys and women are continuing to develop. And Grant and I were in like a little Twitter conversation with Mike Zadig in the most positive way about more publicity for what the men's team did at the World Championships. GT was kind enough to say, well, David interviewed Bill, on Matt Chat. I'm not saying this because I did it, but it was super interesting to listen to Bill talk about the collaboration that those coaches do with each other, and that Bill, who's a wrestling savant, who's a genius, is taking input from people. He's taking input from these coaches about their athletes, but also like David Taylor figured out something on how to beat an underhook against Yazdani. Well, American guys are probably going to wrestle other Iranians, and that might be a helpful tool in other matches, in other weight classes, and using those similar skill sets or similar tactics. And I couldn't have been more impressed with Bill, not only his lack of ego, but how he I use this term intellectual generosity, where he was sharing what he learned with other people and set his ego aside and just wants the team to do the best he can. And so I think that's some of the collaboration that's happening at that senior level on the men's and women's side. I remember a couple of years ago, like the freestyle team worked out with the Greco team to get better at gut wrench offense and defense, things like that, controlling the edge of the mat on their feet. Greco's more about pushing, obviously the stance levels are different, but it's fascinating. So I think USA Wrestling's doing an unbelievable job. Like the men's team took third and we're kind of disappointed, surprised, right? Like we're like, well, if David Carr had done better, blah, 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 maybe, a couple other people, maybe we win it, right? That's a good thing with the expectation level so high, right? GT, you go on a lot of these trips. That's kind of the expectation level, right? Like we expect to either win or be in the hunt for winning as a country.
Yeah, I think once again, once you've had that level and standard of success with any program, I know that even within the collegiate ranks, if you're let's say Alabama football, the standard is the standard. So USA Wrestling has set a very high standard right now. And once again, we've heard everybody from Rich Bender and Bill Zadek and Joe Russell and everybody with USA Wrestling that we're in a golden age of freestyle within the United States, having the teams and the athletes that we have currently, and their standard is the standard. The Jordan Burroughs has been there since whatever it is, 2011.
Yeah.
And he's been the guy that's the standard, and he's upheld that standard, and everybody that basically makes a world team, they all want to feel that, right? And I use him and maybe Adeline Gray as a catalyst to the women's program, because she's been the captain of the women's program for so long. If there isn't even a captain position, she would definitely be a part of that.
Yeah.
And, making all of those different teams, making those standards for all these younger athletes, this is what we do. So, and even as fans, once again, as soon as we start winning all the time and then you don't, then it's like, well, what went wrong? It's like still the World Championships. It's a very, very, very tough tournament for everybody involved. And everybody wants to win it. Everybody does. So, and I think it's just a really cool scenario for us as fans, and then us as commentators and people that basically view this in its entirety. It's a really cool scenario. And the national tournament's the national tournament for all the collegiate people that are listening. Like, just because you have a great tournament or a season, it's still just one tournament. So you can still be very, very, very good, like David Carr and Vito and, other guys that makes these teams. And like, you have one bad match, you lose to the wrong guy, that guy beats another dude and then gets beat, and then you don't get pulled back in. So it's really cool to see, but it's also very powerful to know that we have that level of dominance and getting third in, let's say a style, or second in women's freestyle at the World Championships senior level. They want more. So it's really cool to watch and see.
Marco, I need to jump in.
Yeah. I think we forget that's the most medals that the United States has ever won at U23s. We've never won 5 before. So, and as a coach, that's kind of how I look at things, because that's, the position I'm in. My goal is always to do better. I want to do a little bit better. So we may not have won it, but we had 5 guys place. And some of the greatest times that I had coaching were watching guys place in tournaments, David and Grant, that you didn't really expect to place at tournaments. So we got a couple guys on the podium, at least 2 of them in the finals, that we didn't anticipate being in the finals. And I don't want to take anything away from those guys, because they wrestled phenomenally. But this was a world championship. A lot of people did not expect them to do what they did. So I would say overall it was a great success for the United States. And as long as you keep getting better every year, watch out.
Yeah, I think the success at the World Championships, especially on the men's side with 8 in the finals, it's almost cartoonishly good. And you're just like, well, now if we don't do that every time, like, I mean, you said GT said like the standard Alabama. Well, I mean, he's not going to say it, but the standard at Grandview at the NAIA level, like the standard at Penn State right now. No disrespect to anybody else, but they're the team to beat. Until they lose, they're the team to beat. Like that expectation level, like now, if it doesn't happen, like if Penn State loses and takes second this year, there's going to be a lot of upset people in Happy Valley, where every other program in the country would probably be pretty happy with second. Because realistically, that's been the best it was going to be for a couple years here.
Yep.
So, speaking of international wrestling, let's stay on that before we jump over to college. World Cup, GT was off the air last year, but we talked about this. In both the men's and women's team, the top 5 teams were invited, and then the 6th place team was essentially going to be an all-star team, or not 6th place team, excuse me, the 6th team. Let me not screw it up before we start. The 6th team was going to be an all-star team. Didn't mention it, but let me give a shout out to GT, outfitted by Nike, and they're having to do some work very quickly with personalized uniforms and logos and things like that. I've heard from people above. So Grant, first of all, congratulations on getting all that done. That's impressive. These all-star teams are going to be pretty freaking good, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I think is going to continue to basically evolve as the UWW has this event, and I think it's going to be really cool. It'll kick off here in Baku with the Greco World Cup here next weekend, and basically, have a collective all-world team or a world team that would then be made up of those non-top 5 countries. So it's
if you're able to get the best athlete, like just if you pick any 5 teams, if like let's say I'm on the American team at 57 kg and I don't place, then there's probably going to be a guy who's top 5 in the world in there, and if not, it would probably be like the 6th place guy. Essentially, that's how this would get done, right? Like selection purposes.
Yeah. So I mean, I can give you a brief kind of example of what the Greco World Team is going to look like.
Yeah, please do.
And I'm going to apologize because some of these names I'm not Jason Bryant and I'm not Mr. Hazard.
Just say the country and the place. That's probably good enough. And
just give their first name, Grant. It's easy.
go Ostrander on it.
Yeah, just complete. Yeah, well, I'll do what I can here. So at 55 kg, the Georgian, he got 2nd. So he was the highest placing athlete outside of the top 5 teams, which the top 5 teams are Turkey, Azerbaijan, Serbia, Iran, and Kyrgyzstan. So Georgia was not in the top 5, so that leaves Georgia the ability to have the highest placing individual at that weight class. Surtsin Maya is his name.
Okay.
At 60 kg, it's an athlete from Kazakhstan who got the bronze medal, Sultan Gali. 63, 67 are both from Georgia. One was the silver medalist, the other one got 5th. At 72 kg, the athlete from Ukraine got 3rd. 77 kg, the Hungarian got 2nd. At 82, the athlete from Uzbekistan got 2nd. At 87 kg, there'll be a replacement athlete at this weight class because Bolsultanov from Denmark got 2nd. He ended up getting hurt, so he won't be able to participate, but he ended up getting 2nd, so therefore he would have been on a team there. 97 kg, the world champion had to scratch because of injury, so then they moved to the 2nd place athlete from Bulgaria, Milov. I believe he's going to pull out due to injury, so there'll be another athlete that will compete at 97, and 130 kg from Lithuania, bronze medalist, can't say his name, but big dude, really awesome. So he was the bronze medalist. So you can see that every single athlete from the Greco world team is basically either a 5th or higher at the World Championships. So it's just a collective unit of all of these teams coming together to then wrestle, once again, the teams that have qualified on their own: Turkey, Azerbaijan, Serbia, Iran, and Kyrgyzstan.
So basically that team would probably be the favorite versus any of the other teams. Cause I mean, you're talking about 10 guys that were all in medal matches. And if I know you had a couple guys pull out, but if none of those guys pulled out, 8 of them, I think, were medalists. I mean, no other individual country's got 8 medalists. I mean, like, I think about that in men's freestyle, which, you know, we can get to that at another day. We got time for that. We're on Matt Chat. We're actually going to have, the Coralville, Iowa Sports Commission on USA Wrestling helped set that up for me, like in the middle, like in 2 or 3 weeks from now. I'm excited to talk to those guys about that and not nerd out about just takedowns and reversals and stuff. But I mean, as good as America is, if you took everybody else, especially if like the Russian athletes could wrestle in it, it'd be crazy good. So I think what people need to understand too is that is the December 10 weekend. They fully expect it to sell out. It's in that Coralville arena. I think that thing holds like 6,000 people. I've been in there when it's pretty empty for like the World Team Trials, but it's basically like an indoor hockey rink. But the slope of the seats are really good. So like there's really no bad seat in there. And it's probably a better venue for this kind of event than Carver Hawkeye Arena. You know, you're closer. It's going to be louder. That building's built for wrestling. They got GT's been there. They got a gazillion warm-up mats in the back, you know, like full basketball courts, and, you know, they set it all up. It's going to be awesome. And I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to be there or at the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships because they're the same weekend, but one way or another is going to be awesome for me. But if you're in Iowa or you can get to Iowa, you should go to that event. Like, you know, or I mean, you can't go to Baku, but, you know, for freestyle, and the freestyle one is men's and women's. So you're going to get to see a truckload of matches, and everybody duels everybody, right? Like it's 5 duels.
I don't know if it's everybody wrestles everybody. I haven't looked at the format of how that will play out with the 6 teams, but women's and men's will be both simultaneously competing at the same time.
Oh, wow. I mean, I guess it's either everybody wrestles everybody or you do 2 pools of 3, and then they place 1, 2, 3, and then you do 1 crossover. So they might do it that way. I mean, pretty much that's the only way to do it. So we can talk to the Coralville people about that, or I guess we probably know enough people at USA Wrestling. We could call somebody and get the format. If anybody could, it would be us. All right. So that's very exciting. So a couple other things, preseason nationals are this weekend. I got a text. I texted my buddy Jason Keck, who's been on the show before. It said the pre-seeds are posted on the website. He gave me an example of a couple of like sort of quality level, like Alina Vargas is seeded number 3. So like Max Magana's on there. Cale Peterson is on there. I don't, you know, there's a million kids wrestling, but it's a big tournament. It's one of those things that people put on their resume. It's the longest trip of the year Grant will make to work for Nike. Ostrander might even pop in and sign a few autographs. That's got to be pretty close to you, right, Mark?
Yeah. Well, if it's 10 minutes from where Grant's at, it's probably 20 from where I am. So a little different, a little bit more traveling.
Well, you could probably set up a table next to the Nike booth and give the people what they want. Just set up a first name Mark booth and let the people have some love. But there's going to be some really good wrestling. It's folk style, correct, GT?
Yes.
So we're transitioning back to reversals and things like that. So preseason nationals, World Cup All-Star team, covered all of that. The Big Ten TV schedule is out. I'm not going to go through it because we're going to get into that in a couple weeks. But if you're a person that sets your DVR, if you're not like Mark, who's been smart enough to figure out you just record everything with the word wrestling in it, which is definitely the way to go, you can pull that up. There's some really good duels on there this year, including a few like out-of-conference ones where it's only one Big Ten team like Nebraska, Arizona State, some stuff like that. We will say this again. We will be in Iowa City the February 18th weekend for the Iowa-Oklahoma State meet, which is on a Sunday, because that weekend is the Iowa High School State Wrestling Tournament. And my guess is a lot of people will be in Des Moines on Saturday and Iowa City on Sunday. You'll have a lot of repeat customers there. And Mark, I think you told me this, but Iowa has sold out again, tickets.
Yeah. Season tickets, they sold out again. Yeah.
God bless Iowa. God bless the state of Iowa in wrestling. It's awesome. So let's get into our picks. Let me pull up the sheet here. Go to share screen. Let me get back to 57.
Grant's got a little catching up to do, David.
Yes, that is correct.
Don't you
Fall
worry.
behind.
I can make my picks like this, Mark.
I got this, homie. All right. So first thing is this. We'll go down to where we were at 157. So GT, Mark and I changed 157. As you can see, we both have Monday in the finals now. So you had Teamer and Lee in the finals and Gallagher as your non-top eighter, and 5 out of 8. So we're going to assume Monday is in the top 8. I'll let you look at that again. I know you've probably been studying this, but so basically Franek would be out and Quincy would be at 1. I think every person in the world would rank him number 1 as the returning runner-up. So let's start with how many of the top 8 now with Quincy in there would you pick? And now I've turned into Ostrander. I'll just say Monday instead of Quincy. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I will go 6 of 8 with Quincy being in there, and I'll still keep Lee and Teamer as my finalists.
Solid. Sticking with your boys. I respect that. All right, so you're 6 of 8 now. Okay. Okay, so now at 65, that changed this too. So Quincy Monday is out. So Julian Ramirez would come in at number 8. So your picks at 65 were O'Toole and Carr in the finals. Ramirez can no longer be your top 8, your non-top 8er. And then I'm assuming, well, let me guess, how many of the top 8? It's like 5 out of 8, 6 out of 8, and then we need another 9. Go ahead.
I'm going to take my 6 out of 8. I'll keep O'Toole and Carr, and I'll go back to my original pick from like back in the early part of the spring, and I'll say Facundo.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, so now we got to catch up. We did a couple weights here. I think who picked Sloan? Yeah, Mark's pick's looking good now. Okay, so 74.
This is God's weight right here.
65 and 74, I feel like, are the marquee. I think 65 the top 2, but or 74 the top 2, but 65 is loaded. Got a little less loaded with Quincy Monday, but all right. So top 8ers, real quick: Starace, Lewis, Labriola, Plott, Lout, Ethan Smith, Demetrius Romero, Michael O'Malley. First of all, how many of those guys All-American, GT?
I'm gonna say 6 out of 8.
Okay. Are you picking Starace and Lewis? Or are you going?
Yep.
And then you have DeVos and Runyon we had as your
Correct.
2. Okay. All right. 84. All right. Brooks, Keckheisen, Hidley, Caleb Romero, Marcus Coleman, Trey Munoz, Jonathan Lowe, John Poznansky. How many of the top 8?
I'm gonna take 6 out of 8.
Okay. Finalist.
I'm gonna take Brooks, and I'm gonna just go differently than you guys. I'll take Hidley, even though it's really hard for me to bet against the Northern Iowa boy because I like Parker a lot.
Hidley looked good this weekend or this week or whatever you want to call it.
Keckheisen is a beast. Gosh.
Yeah. And who's your non-top 8er?
Okay, I'm gonna go to.
There's Keegan Moore, Gavin Kane, Hunter Bolin, Abe Assad, Salazar, Samuelson, Feinsilber, Whitlake, Stefanik. Whitlake's an interesting one. Montalvo's an interesting one.
I'll take Hunter Bolin.
Hard to argue that. Maybe that guy lifts weights too.
Yeah, he sure does.
Okay, so 97. Max Dean, Jacob Warner, Stephen Buchanan, Rocky Elam, Bernie Truax, Younger Bastida, Louis Dupre, Michael Beard are your top 8. For people that are only listening to this, the people on the outside looking in, but really good. Gavin Hoffman, Nino Bonacorsi, Thomas Pinola, Tanner Sloan, Ethan Laird, Jack Bronigal up a couple weights, Cam Caffey, who is ranked in the top 4, if not higher, for sure last year at one point. Cordell Norfleet has been ranked. Luke Stout had some big wins. Trumbull, who can pin anybody. Jacob Cardenas is at 19. And Braxton Amos, world team members, at 20. Luke Serber down from heavyweight at much more of his natural weight at 22. So we're going to get you caught up here, GT. How many of the top 8?
I'm going to go 6 of 8.
Okay. Finalist?
I'm going to take Stephen Buchanan and Jacob Warner.
Okay. And your non-top 8er?
I'm going to take Gavin Hoffman.
He almost won my fantasy team for me last year. I needed one more match and I would have won it. Okay. All right. So now move this down here. Okay. We're to heavyweight. So we're going to have to do this a couple different ways because let's say this and just make sure we're all on the same page. If Gable Stevenson comes back, we're assuming he's going to win it. Does anybody disagree with that?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. So we'll have to figure out how we're going to do this top 8 thing because clearly he'd be the non-top 8er, but I think most of us think he's coming back. Colton Schultz, Greg Kerfleet, Mason Paris, Tony Cassiope, Yaroslav Slavakowski, Lucas Davison, Tate Orndorff, Wyatt Hendrickson are your top 8 without Stevenson. Then you got Fernandez, Elam, Hilger, Tay Gadali, Houghton, Nevels, Reed, Sam Schuyler, Golden, Heinzelman, etc. Okay. What do you think the right way to do this is, guys? I think just let's assume Gable's in, Orndorff's 8. Hendrickson's your first non-top 8er. So how many, GT, we'll just keep it going with you, of the Orndorff on up, including Gable's in, how many of the top 8 plays?
I'll say 5 of 8.
Okay. Mark, how many for you?
5 of 8.
Okay. I'm going to go 6 of 8. So let's do this. Let's pick 3 finalists. We all have Gable. So I'll put that in here. And then let's pick 2 other finalists if for some reason he doesn't come back. So GT, who you got?
I'm going to take Cassiope and Schultz.
All right. So you're going to be Cass and Schultz. And if Mark picks him, it's going to be Tony and whoever. Mark, go ahead.
I'm going to go with Tony. And I'm going to go with Mason.
Okay.
I love Mason. He was hurt last year. We got to get him on the other side of Big Tony, though.
All right. I'm going Schultz and Kirk. Okay. So I think that catches us up on the picks.
Well, we got to do it outside the top 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm like, I know I'm missing something. Who you got, GT?
I'm going to take Elam.
There you go.
Huh. Go down, David, go down a little bit. I want, there you go. I want Virginia Tech, Hunter.
Katka?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going Elam. Okay. So we will work on the team picks next week. Let's see what else we have left to cover here. Not sure we have a whole lot left. I'll do a quick preview of just so people know what's coming up. The schedule starts November 1st. Queens at the Citadel, Ouachita Baptist of Little Rock. There's a pretty good duel on Friday night, next Friday night, the 4th, North Dakota State at Nebraska. Those will be some matchups there. On the 5th, there's the Virginia Tech Open. There's the Michigan State Open. You know, Michigan State is Central Michigan, Cleveland State, Illinois, Michigan, Michigan State, Northern Illinois, Northwestern, Ohio, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Utah Valley. At the Virginia Tech Open is App State, Columbia, Davidson, Franklin and Marshall, North Carolina, the Citadel, UVA, VTech, VMI, and West Virginia. There's also the duels down in Jacksonville. A bunch of different matchups there. Probably the marquee matchup is Iowa State versus Wisconsin. I think if everything goes right, we're going to see David Carr against Dean Hamady or Hamidi, so that would be a pretty fun match. I think Carr's favored, but I don't think that's going to be a 3-2 match. Then Sunday is the Clarion Open, the Princeton Open, the Black Knight Scramble. At the Clarion Open is Brown, Clarion, Edinburgh, Gardner-Webb, Kent State, Navy, Pitt, and Purdue. Princeton Open, George Mason, Hofstra, Lock Haven, Presbyterian, Princeton, Rider. And then at the Army Black Knight Scramble is Army, Long Island, Oregon State, and Queens. And then also on Sunday, Lindenwood is at Missouri. The only reason I bring that up is because they're going to do it on Mizzou's softball field. And not to confuse anybody, but that next weekend, the weekend after Halloween, is daylight savings time. So depending where you live, you're actually going to lose an hour of sleep. So you got to make sure that your DVRs are set appropriately. So it's just about upon us, boys. Next week we'll pick the team scores. And I have to say this to close. I gave Mark a lot of trouble last week, GT. You missed it because I had the same combined win as the entire Ostrander family, which is Mark and 2 sons in our fantasy football league. And last week, my team had the single worst performance anybody's had in the 4 years of our league. I don't think anyone scored a touchdown. My tight end, Andrews, who's like the second best guy, scored less than a point. So I'm here to eat my humble pie, Mark. And if I'm going to give you trouble, I got to take the L literally. Mark's son, Ben, had the second worst score and still beat me. So it's a bad week for Team Mirikitani. So, and Mark's got Eckler, so he's going to make the playoffs, and he's the 2-time defending champ. So he's kind of sneaking up on us over there. So anything going on with Grandview, GT? Before when do you guys start? Is it the Grandview Open? Is that the first event, or do you have something before that?
Next weekend is the Luther Hill Invitational at Simpson College. It'll be both men's and women's, I believe, will compete at the same time. I believe in 2 different facilities, I think in the wrestling room and in the field house. And then, yeah, I mean, we're ready to rock and roll. It's go time here. So we got 1 weekend this weekend that basically is kind of off, and then you're into season for competition.
That's awesome. So we will reiterate this throughout the year, but watching college wrestling this year is going to be different because of the red shirt rule. So it used to be the time you could really see these red shirts were at these open tournaments. All 3 of us dealt with these travel rules where you couldn't travel your red shirts, like they had to pay to go their own way. You couldn't technically coach them. So like a kid would sit in the corner and then a coach would stand off to the side or behind the chair. Frankly, probably a lot of coaches just fed their kids anyway because it's actually the right thing to do, even though it wasn't technically the letter of the law. But those rules have changed now. You're allowed to wrestle, I think it's 5 or 6 dates. I'll double check that, but it's at least 5 dates without losing eligibility.
Yep.
So you're going to see kids in not really, probably less of the opens. They have to, if they go to the open, they have to go with the team and it counts as one of the dates. There's no entering unattached. And this is only for true freshmen. Okay. Like if, you wrestled your first year and then you redshirt, you can now go to these opens, and you can't do the 5 dates. It's only for true freshmen. I talked to a D1 coach about that. I talked to Brian Smith. I'm sure he wouldn't care. And he said he thinks eventually the rule will evolve for anybody who's redshirting, but for now it's true freshmen only. But this is really good if you're a wrestling fan, because like if Grant Turner's like the best guy coming out of high school, like a Casey Swiderski, okay, like who's in Iowa State guy, so we'll use him as an example. I think Mark picked him to be his outside the top 8 All-American. It was really difficult for a coach to decide if you're going to pull him out of redshirt. And I shouldn't say really difficult, more difficult than it'll be now, because you'd had to see how they were doing in the room, and then you would see them in open tournaments. But a lot of times they're not hitting the studs. Well, now he can wrestle him if there's an early season. They can wrestle him against Real Woods if they wrestle first semester. That's going to tell you right away where you're at. And that's a perfect example. I didn't do it on purpose, but that's a perfect example. You're going to wrestle a top 3 guy. You don't have to travel him real far. He's going to be a part of a big dual environment. I don't remember where that dual is this year, but if it's in Iowa, especially, how's he going to perform? Is he going to get carvered or not? And that's going to make it much easier for Coach Dresser and staff if they were on the fence about him to decide. Or maybe they thought he was going to wrestle and he doesn't perform the way they think he is, and they can save him a year. So I think this is really good for the athletes, which, we all love wrestling. We all love coaching wrestling. And I think it's going to be really exciting, though, as a fan, too, where you're going to see matches you don't normally see. So we'll try. It'll be easier for us because those kids will be in the rankings. Like when I talked to Tom Ryan, one of those guys is wrestling at 41. One of those freshmen is wrestling. They're trying to figure out which one it's going to be. But it's going to be one of them.
33, David.
33. Sorry. D'Amelio's a 41. My fault. Yeah. Okay, but wrong weight, right concept. Yep. So we're going to see a lot of that stuff going on this year. GT, enjoy Des Moines. Get a postcard. Okay. So,
well,
okay. Marco, good to see you again.
Yep.
Boys.
Hey, remember, David, Russ lost a lot of schools this weekend also. So, we're going to find out some things after this weekend. If you can follow that on the social media pages, you'll find out who won what.
Flo's got a nice summary page of all the wrestle-offs too. So that's a good thing. Good point. I could do a whole podcast on why wrestle-offs shouldn't happen, at least publicly, but they're fun for people to watch. So for Mark and Grant, I'm David. Thank you guys for watching and listening. We'll speak to y'all next week.